Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I'd review this little video that I thought would be very particularly interesting. And this is going to be a video once again about Mr. Saul Canelo Alvarez. And Canelo Alvarez recently, I believe, at a press conference with, of course, his up-and-coming opponent, that Jaime Munguia. And of course, a lot of people, that kind of, have mixed feelings and mixed emotions about that fight. I think that it's a pretty good fight. I like the fight. Of course, it's not the fight that, including me or myself or everyone else wants to see, at least mainly. I think that Jaime Munguia, that, he's probably around the B plus to A minus level, maybe A minus because, he has defeated some of the top contenders. And, of course, he recently had a very dominant performance over that of John Ryder, who's probably been through some wars, but it is what it is. But anyways, in this recent interview, Canelo Alvarez was talking about the potentiality of fighting that of David Benavidez and the negotiations, which apparently didn't pan out. And Canelo stated a multitude of things in this video, some stuff that I agree with and some stuff that I tend to disagree with. But I just thought that it was very particularly interesting. But Canelo Alvarez, he's going to state certain things overall, which, once again, that I kind of agree with. One of them being that people overall, that it's never enough, that no matter who I fight, that it's never enough, whether it be, once upon a time, Gennady Golovkin or Lara or Caleb Plant or Saunders or blah, 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 all this other stuff. But the thing is that when you're taking a look at, as debatably the face of boxing, and someone that is debatably the number one pound for pound fighter, which Canelo Alvarez is looked at as potentially both, heavy is the head that wears the crown. At the end of the day, you're going to have certain expectations. And if Canelo Alvarez is looked at as a great fighter, and in my view, he's not just a great fighter, he's an all-time great fighter, you are going to be looked at, as fighting the fights that everybody wants to see. And at the current moment in time, right now, the fight that everyone wants to see is going to be that of David Benavidez. And I'm not going to 100% state that Canelo Alvarez is ducking that of David Benavidez at the current moment in time, because once again, I don't really know 100% how the negotiations went behind the scenes. And on top of that, it does appear a little bit odd to me that David Benavidez overall is moving up to 175 and then claiming to move up to cruiserweight right afterwards. I really don't know why he would be doing that. I don't know. I would kind of understand maybe not wanting to fight Artur or Dimitri Bivol, potentially if you're still trying to get that Canelo Alvarez shot. But to move up the cruiserweight, that seems a little bit of a risky move because I don't really know how, well he'd be able to make back at 168. I don't know. That's why I'm wondering if Canelo and Benavidez' teams, if they had a little bit of a discussion and are just trying to set up the fight for next year. I don't know what's going on in order to create a similar Floyd versus Manny Pacquiao dynamic. I'm not really sure. But Canelo Alvarez, what I will state is this. He does take a look at David Benavidez as a threat in my personal view. You can tell by the way that he talks about David Benavidez. He knows that David Benavidez would be one hell of a fight to fight. And of course he would, because David Benavidez at the end of the day is bigger. He's the younger fighter when it comes down to it. He's probably not, the most technical fighter that I've ever seen, at least compared to some other fighters. But he's a guy that's gotten a little bit more technical as the years have went along. And on top of that, he's got decent power. He's pretty much a light heavyweight at the very least. And he's a guy that's a decent athlete. So Canelo knows that would be a very difficult fight. And on top of that, David Benavidez also has great stamina, at least overall, it appears throughout the majority of his fights. So Canelo Alvarez, I think the way that he's taking a look at it is that if this fight is going to happen, I'm going to get paid very handsomely. And I don't completely disagree with Canelo Alvarez there. But if he did end up turning down the $55 million, I can kind of understand that because Canelo Alvarez, I believe, made about $45 million for the Caleb Plant fight. So I think Canelo Alvarez's viewpoint is that at least if he did turn down that $55 million, that I made $45 million against Caleb Plant. And you expect me overall to fight David Benavidez, a guy that's a very big threat, and a guy overall to where that would be a huge fight, potentially for both of us. When it comes down to it, and you're expecting me overall to take that fight just for $55 million. Now, of course, that was also with other pay-per-view advantages and other stuff like that. But Canelo Alvarez, I believe that he's going to want more money for that fight potentially. And once again, there could have been maybe a little bit of a discussion between them behind closed doors, maybe to take certain fights before that fight is set up. But if not, Canelo Alvarez is going to get a lot of criticism for not trying to really make that fight, and well warranted. But anyways, once again, there's going to be certain things that Canelo says in this video that I tend to agree with and certain things that I disagree with. But let's get into the video. Let's see what he has to say.
Canelo, first off, very respectful press conference with Jaime. How important is that for you, for an opponent to be respectful, for you to give them a fight?
I think it's very important. I always respect more the fighter, be respectful, because it's when you realize it's gonna be a good fight, because the fighters who talk a lot of things, they come into the fight, they scared. So I like this kind of fight because
Well, sometimes when a fighter talks a lot, they can be scared. But other times, it's also showing of supreme confidence. Like when Keith Thurman was a fighter, he used to kind of talk a lot, but he was very confident within himself, at least against Sean Porter and Danny Garcia. Conor McGregor, of course, he was a fighter that pretty much talked throughout a whole lot of his fights, and he was usually very supremely confident within himself. Of course, with the exception of that Khabib Nurmagomedov fight, he knew that Khabib meant business. And some of the other fighters did as well, but I think that he believed that he could beat them with the Khabib fight. He knew that there was a decent chance that Khabib possibly was going to get him. And of course, that ended up being a major ass whooping, uh, in Conor McGregor's part, because Conor, of course, ended up losing that fight bad. But anyways, I kind of understand where Canelo was coming from, but, at the end of the day, just because someone trash talks or, talks a little bit throughout a press conference, to me, it doesn't always mean that they're scared, but you kind of have to read overall. Once again, I've always stated this: when a fighter shows that all of a sudden they change energy, or all of a sudden their personality just completely changes from what it was before, that's how a fighter is either in their head or they're potentially scared of that fighter. Like when Deontay Wilder, who's usually very boisterous and on this pro-black narrative and all this other stuff, when all of a sudden he was quiet as a church mouse and not trying to be this civil rights activist and, this, civil rights killer when it came down to it, this guy that, was this major knockout artist, and all of a sudden he was, playing this, oh, there's a right time for everything bullshit when it comes on it. I knew Tyson Fury had him wrapped around his finger. Tyson Fury was living rent-free in his head. But, when it comes on it, once again, I understand what Canelo's getting at.
I know it's gonna be a great fight.
Tell me if it was a wrong observation or right. Did it feel weird to be on stage with Oscar? Did you feel annoyed or angry that he was there on stage?
I don't like that kind of person, to be honest. That's it. But I feel comfortable because it's my land, not his land. So at the end of the day, I feel comfortable with myself, with everything I did, because everything you see, we made that. We made that, nobody else.
Yeah, together.
Together. Beltran, PBC, and Canelo team. That's it.
So what's going for you on the future? Are you going to be a free agent? Like, what happened with you splitting from PBC, then coming back?
I'm very happy to work with everybody. No, I'm happy to work with Al Haymon, and he's happy to work with me. And if something happened or something there is for me more important, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to be good with Haymon, with everybody. I like to work with everybody, and they know I'm very disciplined, I'm very hard worker, and that's why I can do anything.
Is this true? Let me know if this is true or if people are wrong. Is it true you offered $5 million for a Benavidez fight and then you guys didn't hear back?
No. Nothing is true. No. I don't know where you. Yeah.
And I think the dad said.
Now this is interesting because the Benavidez side, in an interview, I heard them explicitly state overall that Canelo Alvarez and his side offered them $5 million. So the question is, who's lying here? And to be honest with you, I'm not really quite sure. Is it possible that Canelo Alvarez maybe offered them $5 million, expecting David Benavidez' team to basically say, hey, that's way too low in a fight of this magnitude. That's bullshit. We're not taking that, to make it look like David Benavidez' side priced themselves out. That way Canelo Alvarez can look squeaky clean. Or maybe was there not something overall that, was there not something offered in the first place? Or did they potentially offer that and they didn't like it, and the Benavidez side, they, decided to go elsewhere? I don't really know. But to me, it seems like one of the first two options.
And, they offered us $5 million and...
No, never.
Never.
Okay. Not that I know, and I know everything. He offered the amount he say, that amount I can make with anybody. So that's nothing.
You don't think that's the one of the biggest fights that can be made?
I don't. Maybe. Who knows? But he he brings nothing to the table for me. It's just he brings just 25 pounds more in the night, the fight on the night. That's it. But if
Listen, Canelo Alvarez, and I understand that at the current moment in time that David Benavidez, that he is not a champion, but basically what that translates to, excuse me, is that I know that this dude is a very big dude. On top of that, he's relatively talented, and you're not going to get the fight out of me unless I get paid very handsomely. So at the end of the day, Al Heyman, you better pay up.
some promoter, not him, because he's nothing to offer me anything.
Canelo, ¿cómo te sientes?
He's nothing to offer me money, I'm the one. So, but if one promoter.
You are the one, Canelo Alvarez. I agree. You're basically the move shaker right now. You're the main guy. I understand that. But at the end of the day, Jaime Munguia is not a fighter when you just talk about him. Jaime Munguia is not a guy that offers you more than that of David Benavidez. At the end of the day, Jaime Munguia is more your size when it comes down to it. But David Benavidez is the guy that offers more, because you realize that a lot of people are talking about this fight. So once again, I'm not sure if Canelo, if they maybe talk behind the scenes and they're trying to build up this fight as time goes along. But to say that David Benavidez brings nothing to the table, no, I don't agree with that. But once again, what that's Canelo's way of basically stating is that if we're gonna make this fight, then I better get paid very, very handsomely.
Who I work to, they come and say, I offer to you 150 to 200 million. I fight tomorrow.
Canelo,
That's the only.
Right, of course, but who wouldn't take that deal? The thing is, Canelo Alvarez, is that, in my personal view, I don't see you getting 150 million or 200 million unless you're also talking about pay-per-view revenue stuff like that. Now, I would maybe even understand possibly getting paid 90 to 100 million, but getting paid straight up 150 to 200 million dollars, I just don't see that happening. So is that you maybe talking about pay-per-view prices, Canelo, or is that you potentially pricing yourself out? We'll have to see. Once again, I could even understand once again more than the 55 million if it was offered to him, because I could understand that, because it is one of the bigger fights in boxing. But at the end of the day, Canelo, the way that he's talking here, he kind of says, oh, I don't know, overall maybe it's one of the biggest fights in boxing. Canelo knows that it's one of the biggest fights in boxing, but he does realize the threat of a David Benavidez, and I don't think that he really minds setting up the fight, but he believes that he's going to have to get paid handsomely.
That's the only reason I fight.
And I have no problem with that, but there's a difference between getting paid handsomely and pricing yourself out. So let's see what happens as time goes along.
With him, because the only thing he brings to the table is 25 more pounds.
Canelo, I think this is a great fight that the Mexican.
And what I will say is this: I do agree with Canelo Alvarez on that, because David Benavidez, in my view, he is a little bit of a weight bully. He's not a guy that's a natural 168 pounder. Canelo also is not a natural 168 pounder either, by the way, but he's a lower guy. He's a guy that really should be fighting at the 160 pound weight division. He's really more of a middleweight. David Benavidez is really more of a light heavyweight, and that's probably at a minimum when it comes down to it. So I get it, but at the end of the day, Canelo, if he's a mandatory there, if he's a guy that is fighting there, then at the end of the day, you are gonna have to fight that dude. Now, if he fights at light heavyweight, and if he can't go back down to 168, then maybe you might be able to get away overall with potentially not fighting him. And who knows? Could there maybe been something behind the scenes where Canelo says, listen, if you can take care of Vosdick and maybe Gilberto Soto Ramirez, or potentially fight the winner of the Better Biev versus Bivol fight when it comes down to it, and then maybe we can make that fight at 175, then we'll make the fight. Could Canelo maybe be doing something like that? He could be. I'm not quite sure.
Fans are going to enjoy it, but is there any pressure to make the fight? We're speaking about Benavidez because you got people
No
like
pressure.
Mike Tyson and
No
even
pressure.
Ryan Garcia. They said Ryan Garcia said if he was you, he would already.
Well, Canelo, I'll tell you this, and you have a very big fan base, and I like Canelo. Canelo's an all-time great fighter in my view, but if it is very apparent, at least overall to the public, that you clearly are avoiding David Benavidez, or overall to the point to where, you clearly turned down a multitude of deals, including the next one that might be offered to you, and it's a very lucrative deal for, let's say, 70 plus million, the pressure is going to be on you. and he can state overall whatever he wants, but the pressure will be on Canelo Alvarez. He's going to get a great amount of criticism, and if he does overall turn down a deal like that, it's going to be somewhat well warranted.
Benavidez, Mike Tyson said you need to fight him. Is there any pressure?
I don't need to fight anybody. I don't need to prove anybody anything because
Well, that's where, in my view, Mr. Canelo Alvarez, you're a little bit wrong there. And because when I when I take a look at athletes, at the end of the day, you always have to prove yourself. Not necessarily overall to the fans or anything like that, but at the end of the day, you are going to have to prove overall to the boxing commissions and overall the people that rank the pound for pound list when it comes down to it, that if you want to debatably be in that spot, if you want to debatably be as highly ranked as what you are, and if you're still debatably the king, you are going to have to face certain people. It just is what it is. And I understand where Canelo is coming from, because Canelo has fought pretty much, I'm not going to say everybody, but, almost everybody in his career that he's needed to. There's certain fights that, of course, slipped through the cracks or didn't happen, like the Demetrius Andrade fight. The Jamal Charlo fight didn't happen, but really, to be honest with you, and this never gets talked about with the LDBC and new media, but Jamal Charlo actually turned down a deal a very long time ago, but it never gets mentioned. Jamal Charlo, that fight was probably supposed to happen, but it never did. There's some other ones, but at the end of the day, Canelo has fought a lot of great challenges throughout his career. So, I give a great amount of credit to Canelo Alvarez for that. But you can't use this potential excuse, at least if Canelo Alvarez is using that as an excuse to state that, oh, well, I fought everybody in my career, so, overall, I don't really have to face anybody anymore. No, sir, that's not how professional sports or competition works. At the end of the day, you're in a sport, and you have to prove yourself against the best competition. All right, Novak Djokovic, if he's competing in tennis, and if he's trying to compete for more Grand Slams, he doesn't say overall, oh, I have nothing left to prove. I mean, in a certain way, he doesn't really have much left to prove. But in my view, as long as you're competing, you always have something to prove. Period. Canelo has already said it himself, in my view, as an all-time great fighter and a great fighter. I don't think there's any doubt about that, at least in my view, if you're a logical person and you know anything about boxing. But you always have something to prove as long as you're in the heat of battle or in the heat of competition. It just is what it is. And that's for every sport out there. Doesn't matter. You always have something to prove.
I remember when this happened with Golovkin, and then it happened with this. So I don't need to prove anything with anybody. So this fight with Jaime Munguia, you need to respect it, because this fight is more important than other fights. So
the Jaime Munguia fight, Mr. Canelo Alvarez, is not more important than David Benavidez fight, and you know that, Mr. Canelo Alvarez. So let's stop overall once again, playing stupid here. You know that David Benavidez fight is more important than the Jaime Munguia fight. Okay, it is what it is. And once again, Canelo Alvarez is a great fighter. I like Canelo Alvarez, but once again, he realizes that David Benavidez, that he's a threat. But in order to get that fight to happen, Canelo's gonna have to be paid handsomely.
It is what it is.
And I don't really have a problem with that. Now, if I hear something overall and it's confirmed that Canelo Alvarez turns down a $75 million deal or something like that in order to fight David Benavidez or something like that with plus pay-per-view revenues and something like that, and then they have discussions about it, then in my view I can definitely go on Canelo Alvarez even a little bit harder. But it's very apparent in my view that Canelo, he realizes the threat that David Benavidez is potentially going to be. But I don't mind him, once again, getting, paid more handsomely, but Canelo Alvarez, he's going to have to be very careful. And once again, this, thing of, oh, well, I fought everyone in my career. He has mainly fought everybody in his career. But at the end of the day, it's like you can't just hide behind that excuse throughout the whole entire time. It is what it is, at least if that's what he's trying to do.
Yes, and you remember when you guys asking me for Golovkin, and I fought with Golovkin, and then Callum Smith, and then Billy Joe Saunders, and then Caleb Plant, and then... So, never is enough for you guys, but
I do agree with that, Canelo Alvarez. I think that for a lot of people, that's, no matter what you do when you're looked at as the top, that, that it's never enough. But at the end of the day, you are going to have to give the fans what they want, because if not, then your pay-per-view sales are going to start to decline. And at the end of the day, there's always going to be that black X on your record about why did you not fight that at David Benavidez. They're always going to wonder that. All right, so it is what it is. But I do agree with Canelo Alvarez that, especially with a lot of these fans from the LDBC and new media, let's be real, the pro-black cult, no matter who Canelo faced, whether he was avoiding Golovkin or avoiding that of Billy Joe Saunders or Caleb Plant, They said that, Canelo was going to avoid all those guys, Then he also fought Laura and Danny Jacobs and all those guys. Then he beat all those guys. And then it still wasn't enough. And then they made excuses. So I get it to a certain degree. But that's par for the course. When you talk about, once again, being at the top. Floyd Mayweather had to deal with the same thing. Manny Pacquiao had to deal with the same thing. Andre Ward, someone had to deal with the same thing. That's par for the course. At the end of the day, I somewhat agree with what Canelo Alvarez is stating. But stating overall that you don't have to fight anybody else. No, sir. I'm sorry. That's not how professional sports works. At the end of the day, if you're in the playoffs, in the NFL or the NBA, you have to face that team overall that you're going to meet in a certain bracket or a certain seed. And at the end of the day, boxing, even though it's a little bit more of a, it's a little bit more, I don't want to say anonymous. That's probably not the right word, but it's a little bit more interesting. And in terms of its rankings, it's a little bit more overall, different. By ranking things. But at the end of the day, yeah, you still have to fight people within your weight class. All right, it is what it is.
I don't need to prove anything to anybody anymore.
And once again, I don't think that Canelo Alvarez really is a natural 168-pounder, but you're competing there. So at the end of the day, you're going to have to fight people there.
I've been done everything in my career.
Do you respect their opinions, like Mike Tyson saying it? Do you respect his opinion, or how do you feel about like Mike Tyson?
I respect his opinion if he was sober.
Canelo Alvarez said something overall about, so the reporter mentioned something about Mike Tyson, and he said, what do you think about Mike Tyson's opinion? Because I believe Mike Tyson stated that he believes that Canelo is avoiding that of David Benavidez. And he said, I respect Mike Tyson's opinion if he was sober. Basically stating what? That, Mike Tyson pretty much is, on that shit. And it's very possible. Mike Tyson has really been on drugs his whole entire life. For those of you overall that, read The Undisputed Truth about Mike Tyson actually used to use a prosthetic penis, I believe, in order to pass drug tests, because he was constantly on weed and constantly on other shit. And then, now, of course, he never revealed that he was possibly on steroids. It's possible that, very possible that he was on steroids. We never know. I won't quite say it for Mike Tyson, but, it's very possible. But, Mike Tyson has been on drugs his whole entire life. But at the end of the day, Mr. Canelo Alvarez, you are going to have to eventually get in the ring with David Benavidez if he remains an undefeated threat. Or the pressure is going to be insurmountable. It is what it is, and somewhat warranted. Because, once again, he's within your weight class. You're going to have to fight him.
No, yo creo que...
But anyways, that's pretty much about it for this video. I just thought that I would talk about that. But Canelo Alvarez is going to have to get in the ring with David Benavidez. Once again, we'll see where this ends up going. I found it a little bit odd that David Benavidez moved up to the light heavyweight division, especially from hearing overall that he did not wait for the potential WBC to strip that of Canelo Alvarez. But that could also maybe been just because maybe Benavidez didn't want to wait around, and he stated, I could have another position to possibly get a big fight at the light heavyweight division. And let me state this, David Benavidez, he's in a very precarious situation right now. And if Canelo is planning to try and avoid David Benavidez, if he is, this may have been his plan all along, to possibly get him within that, light heavyweight contendership, because then that might possibly put more pressure off Canelo Alvarez and more on David Benavidez. And let me tell you what, if David Benavidez gets in that light heavyweight title eliminator and then doesn't fight the title, holder between Bivol or Beterbiev, he might get a certain amount of criticism. And let me tell you what, that might be somewhat well warranted, because to be quite honest with you, it isn't like David Benavidez is really a natural 168-pounder anyway. he's pretty much, a guy that is a weight bully in disguise. I mean, for me, it's not in disguise, but it is what it is. But once again, and by no means am I stating overall that Canelo Alvarez should not fight him if Benavidez is at the 168-pound weight class. But once again, it's going to be interesting, because Benavidez, he's putting himself in a dangerous situation right now, because once again, if he potentially puts himself in that title eliminator, if he's even willing to take that fight, that's not going to be an easy fight for him to win. And I've already stated long ago, I don't think that David Benavidez beats either the best version of Artur Beterbiev or Dimitri Bivol. I don't think that he beats either of them. I've seen Bivol not just beat Canelo Alvarez, he beat the shit basically out of a cruiserweight/heavyweight in Gilberto Ramirez. I mean, he moved him around like he was a baby in that fight. And then of course Artur Beterbiev, he was able to pretty much crush every single one of his enemies, or crush every single one of his opponents at the light heavyweight division. So we'll see. That's going to be an excellent fight, by the way. I don't really know who to pick in that fight. That's one of those fights to where, they're the perfect type of style to really defeat each other, but we'll see. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. But we'll see where Canelo Alvarez goes from here. I do agree that Canelo Alvarez, that he's fought a lot of people and that he's already proven himself in his career. But Canelo, you're unified at that weight class. And at the end of the day, you're going to have to do a little bit more proving. Not necessarily overall to the boxing fans, but overall at the end of the day, you are going to have to fight the fights that people want you to see. If you want that money still in, your pocketbook, it is what it is. But we'll see. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.